Hey everyone, Jeff Lee here, coming to you live from the 2017 Post-NAB event here at AbelCine with MoPictive. I am actually here with Ned Soltz because this has been a joint collaboration for the past 5 years or so. We've evolved the event, as you can tell, a little bit. For the first time, we're doing a live stream. Of course, that's always new. But like always, the whole goal of this is to take a little slice of Vegas and bring it to New York City. For those that either A, couldn't make it to the show, or B, just didn't want to, or C, who went, but maybe just want a little bit more private time with some of the gear. So Ned, thank you again for joining us. Thank you so much for, again, MoPictive has been a great partner for us. This is awesome support that we've had year after year after year. Generally speaking though, I'd like to ask you, what do you think trend-wise? I know every year we talk about trends, and every year there's always a new buzzword or acronym that we always talk about. So in your opinion, what do you think this year's sort of going trend was?
Well, I think this year's trend is integration, because we're not seeing a lot of new cameras, we're not seeing a lot of new hardware specifically. Maybe in the new introductions we're seeing a lot of lenses, but that's another matter that I'll get to. But right now it's how do we get all this working together? How do we create integrated solutions for the respective markets and targets that we're shooting for? And how do we look at new technologies such as the advent of high dynamic range? If there's any one thing that is the new buzzword now, it's HDR. 4K is already passé. 4K is acceptable, that's normal. The movement to 4K was much faster. HD to 4K was much faster than the movement from SD to HD. So 4K is there and it's a given. But now how do we get the most out of these 4K cameras that we can shoot? How can we deliver it? And that's where HDR is coming into the picture right now.
Right, and HDR was, what, 2 years running now, at least 2 or 3 years. It's been a big theme, but I agree with you. This year the trend was definitely accessibility to that luxury of HDR.
Yeah.
You know, it's always something we say, you have to see it to believe it, and it's absolutely true.
And the images are amazing, and right now, of course, what's driving it, of course, are the TV set manufacturers. And the fact is you can find relatively inexpensive consumer HDR level TVs. So the technology is already out there for the consumer. The question now is producing it, the question is delivering it, but from our perspective, the greater question right now is in producing it, how do we monitor it? How do we understand it? How do we learn to grade for it? And how, in other words, do we optimize what our cameras can do, and what kind of hardware investments do we need in order to achieve that? So that's where we are from the production side, because the delivery side is pretty much ready to go with the consumer sets. I've seen consumer HDR sets for $600, $800, $1,000, so it's within the range right now, and all it needs is content.
Yeah, content drives everything, obviously. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect currently. As we know, a lot of television manufacturers are kind of fighting over which standard they want to adapt, whether it be HD10 or even Samsung's new HD10 Plus, I think they call it.
10, right, yeah.
Right, or PQ and all that stuff. So where do you see that going? Like, is this going to be another sort of Blu-ray versus HD DVD, or how do you see that panning out?
You know, I think we're going to have a bit of competition for a while. Dolby Vision, I think may be about the best, but because it's proprietary, because it's licensed, that might not have the success of an HDR10, which is going to be open source. So we may see a lot moving toward HDR10. That's where virtually all the sets are right now. I believe it's LG that's marketing a Dolby Vision OLED consumer set, but they're running $5,000, $6,000. So that's already out of the typical consumer range. We're seeing, for example, with the Sony cameras now, the introduction with the FS5 and the Z150 of the HLG hybrid log gamma curve, which is going to be very suitable for it. AJA is going to be having firmware for the Kona cards to be able to output a variety of that, as well as a standards converter. And if you're using your BMD cards, only the standalone Thunderbolt cards right now are capable of HDR. And then how you're going to monitor it becomes another set of issues. But I think that's all pragmatic, and it's all going to work itself out. But if I were putting money on any standard right now, it would be HDR10, just because of the free availability of it.
Yeah, that obviously, if we were in Vegas, we'd say you put some money on HDR10,
yeah,
but
right, yeah.
We're no longer in Vegas. But so other than HDR, which again I agree with you, is absolutely huge. It's just beautiful to look at, and everyone who sees it, even if you're a regular layperson, casual observer, you absolutely understand it. Outside of that, and you touched upon this a little bit earlier, optics. I thought optics was really clever this year, where we always worried about all these large format cameras, but there's no lenses to cover. But this year is kind of the opposite, where we're starting to see a lot more optics coming out for those large sensor cameras.
Right, and we're seeing superb optics right now because we're seeing a whole range of optics between still camera lenses and higher cine lenses. So I'm going to say like the $3,500, $10,000 or $15,000 range of lenses, where we're seeing some amazing offerings from Fujinon and from Sigma, and Zeiss has a new few that are into the equation. So we're seeing a higher quality glass than a still glass, but we're still not priced at that same level as the $18,000, $20,000 and up PL mount cine glass. We're also seeing a lot of this, of course, in the Sony E-mount, with the popularity right now of the FS7 and the FS7 II, the popularity of the Sony A7 series of cameras. So a lot of native E-mount. And a lot of full frame lenses. So the full frame lenses may also hint to me that maybe there's another trend in the market. I think maybe the next trend we may be seeing in cameras might be full frame cameras. There's a demand for that. I think sometimes it's not called for. I think full frame is too much sometimes. But I think there's a demand for it just because people are able to shoot full frame now with their mirrorless or DSLR cameras. And the glass is certainly going to be there for it. So if there's any one trend I want to look for in a couple of years, it's going to be full frame cameras. And again, the market's going to have to test that to see whether it actually has a demand and whether there's an actual use for it once those cameras are out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, Super 16 still exists.
Yeah.
Many shows, episodic television, documentaries, etc., are still shooting that format, which I guess by today's standards are older, much older.
Right. And Micro Four Thirds standards, like we're seeing with the GH5, certainly the standard Super 35 that we're shooting with most of our sensors right now is probably adequate for most of what we're doing. Now, when we start getting into some of the larger sensors like the Red, that's more for cinema use and big screen. And I don't know whether there really is a need for shooting full frame on these cameras. We're going to have to see, because we're going to need something that's full frame with minimized rolling shutter or with a global shutter. So, we'll have to see. But certainly with the full frame lenses that are there right now, if that transition should occur, the optics are going to be there for it.
For sure. And I think all of that comes down to just choice, which I love. The fact that we have all these options as creatives, as filmmakers. We now have the option to go full frame, which was usually reserved for the elite of the industry.
Right.
Now we're sort of making it accessible for everyone to shoot, which I'm really excited about.
Right. And we have the options right now, and inexpensive options, to shoot log for the best dynamic range. We have even relatively inexpensive and manageable workflow options to shoot raw. So we have all of that, and sometimes we even forget that many scenarios are just as well shot with a Rec 709. So we have every single possible option that's there. But now, as we're seeing HDR, we're seeing cameras now with Rec 2020 codecs in them. So they're already going to be set up for HDR. So we have the ultimate choice in price. We have the ultimate choice in size and form factor. So it's probably a very good time to be a content creator right now, because the hardware that you need is out there.
Switching gears a little bit, one of the interesting things I think is sort of this idea of connectivity. Everything is Wi-Fi based. Sometimes not necessary, in my opinion. There's certain things you just don't need Wi-Fi to do. However, on the converse of that, there are some things that are really clever that were never possible, or at least never possible without a huge budget. So things like connected lights. Digital Sputnik had a great showing. Airy had, of course, with the sky panels. A lot of new things coming out that are all connected. What do you think about that?
Right. I think that and IP connectivity as well is very significant, because in fact I was talking to someone who's one of the vendors here, as a matter of fact, who's working with CNN on their new installation that they're going to be having in Manhattan, probably opening 2018 or 2019, and that's all going to be interconnected via IP. So we've got that framework right now. We've got the NDI protocol from NewTek, which is probably about the leading protocol for IP connectivity, but particularly wireless video. That really is going somewhere, because right now we're able to get quality wireless video from camera to recording or monitoring media with minimal to zero latency and with virtually no loss. So that's important. And that, of course, is also making tremendous differences in the news gathering business, to look at another side of our industry with more and more obsoleting the microwave truck, because so much of that now being Wi-Fi or being by a bonded cellular, and those technologies improve. And live streaming as well. The JVC cameras are particularly strong in those areas of being able to live stream directly from the camera right to YouTube Live or Facebook or any of your other streaming services. So wireless is the new technology that's being added and overlaid to cameras. So in other words, we don't need new cameras right now, we just need the add-ons to those cameras to give us new methods of not only just acquisition, but also of delivery.
I think one interesting thing is I think we'll start to see cameras that have HDMI or SDI ports, or both, but also Ethernet ports, and that'll be the third connectivity point.
The third connectivity, right. And those Ethernet ports are then going to fit in to the IP infrastructures that we're able to evolve, not just if you're CNN or a broadcaster or a major studio, but even if you're a small house or an individual content creator that may have a station or two, and then to be able to work IP, and to be able to work remotely. Because imagine you could be, with all this IP and remote, you could be a director in California punching up the shots on a multicam shoot in New York, because it's all going to be over IP. And that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up real quick, any other trends that you saw that were interesting? Maybe not even trends yet, maybe a little crystal ball prediction time now. Anything that piqued your interest that were like, oh, we should keep an eye on that for next year?
Piquing my interest right now is a lot of timelined text. Digital Anarchy is just beginning to ship its transcriptive program, which will be able to take an Adobe Premiere timeline, upload it to Microsoft or to IBM Watson or to another transcription service, and give you a transcription in a matter of minutes of your timeline with about 95% accuracy. And we're going to see similar programs as well from Coremount for Final Cut 10. And these are going to be relatively inexpensive and certainly considerably cheaper, just a mere fraction of the price of what it would actually cost to transcribe your interviews. And they tend to be working at about 3 times real time. So if you have 60 minutes of interviews, you can theoretically get your transcription back in about 20 minutes and then spend some time in cleaning it up. And of course, that's only going to get better as voice recognition gets better. So that to me is very exciting, as one who shoots a lot of interviews. This would be wonderful because you can build it as subtitles, you can print the text, you can actually edit from that and go right to the edit point in your text. So that to me is an exciting technology coming down the road, and it's only going to take a year or so for it really to reach full potential.
Yeah, it's one of those things that isn't super obvious in my opinion, but it's like once you have it, you go, how do I not have this? Right, like Siri, Alexa, not the camera Alexa, but the Amazon version of it.
Right. I mean, because the voice recognition has gotten scary accurate right now.
Fantastic. Well, Ned, thank you so much again for joining me on this little intro piece that we're doing. Thank you again for all your support over the past couple of years.
Jeff, thank you, AbelCine, and it's a wonderful synergy between our MoPictive user group and AbelCine, our vendor of choice.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. For those out there watching on the internet, stay tuned for more. We're going to be coming to you very shortly. We'll take a quick second while we transition to the next camera. We're going to stay tuned with Jeff Smith. He's going to be talking to the folks from ARRI and seeing what they're showing off. For those of you that are online, maybe watching on the phone, if you can still make it down, come down to 609 Greenwich Street. But if not, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you again for MoPictive and Ned. Thank you also to all of our wonderful vendors and guests that are here for this wonderful event as well. That's it for now, but again, stay tuned. We'll be right back with you.
Thank you.